Yes, would you ask Mr Black to come back in, please? Right, Mr Black, ready to carry on?
I am, yeah.
Good, thank you. Yes, Mr Millett?
Mr Chairman, thank you. Mr Black, I want to ask you some questions now about TMO's fire safety strategy in April 2016. Do you remember that in April 2016, Janice Ray circulated a note about potential fire safety strategy review? Do you remember that?
I can't recall at the moment.
TMO 100243551. We can see that note. TMO 100243551. It's paper 4, so it appears to have been presented to a meeting. It's entitled Review of Fire Safety Strategy. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you play any part in that review?
I can't recall at the moment, thank you.
Did you see this document at the time?
Again, I can't recall. Imagine if it's been circulated as I would have.
Right. Janice Ray told us that she had assumed that it went to the executive team at the time. Do you know whether it did?
I can't recall at this stage now.
Now, take it from me, and if I'm wrong, I will be corrected, I'm sure, but there's no mention in this review paper of any issue regarding the closing out of FRA actions. Can you comment?
No.
Do you know why there is no mention in this document of any issue relating to the closing out of FRA actions?
No.
Do you remember, maybe you don't, thinking to yourself at the time that it's surprising that there was no mention of any closing out of FRA actions in this document?
No, apologies.
Can we look at TMO 00842211, please? This is an email sent by Janice Ray on the 7th of June 2017 to Barbara Matthews, attaching papers for a health and safety team meeting to take place on the 13th of June 2017. If you just take a moment to look at the header of the email there, you will note that you are not, it appears, CC'd on this or an addressee of it. But do you remember, did you think you received this email or saw it in some other way?
Sorry, I can't recall at the moment.
The subject is Papers for Health and Safety Committee, 13th June, 10 a.m. Now, you weren't on the Health and Safety Committee, so can you tell us whether, as a matter of normal procedure, you would have received this set of documents?
Sorry, I can't call.
Can't recall. No, help me. If you look down the screen and you can see a list of 14 papers for the following week's Health and Safety Committee meeting, in the ordinary course of things, would you have received these documents, even though you were not to attend at that meeting?
I don't recall receiving these.
No, but in the ordinary course, would you?
I'm not sure, really.
Right.
I'm not copied in, so she sent.
I think the question, Mr Black, is did you normally receive copies of papers produced for the Health and Safety Committee?
Yes, I think you usually would.
Right, thank you.
Right. Now we can see, as you see, that there was an executive team meeting scheduled for the 14th of June, and attached to that email was paper 4, as you can see that. FRAs. In fact, it's paper 4, but it's item 5. FRA action stats, fire safety update, paper 4A, as you can see from that email.
Yeah.
Let's look at paper 4. This is TMO 00842218. Now, this was the last in a series of statistics provided periodically by Janice Ray to the executive team from 2016. And I say it's the last in a series before the Grenfell Tower fire on the 14th of June 2017. Looking at the numbers, The total outstanding actions was 142. You see that under total in the outstanding column?
Yes, sorry.
Yes. Can you see that? 142.
I can, sorry, I was just reading the table.
And that's at 7th of June 2017, and the figures in brackets are expressed to be as at 10th of March 2017. And the total figure for partially complete was 165. You see that?
Yes.
Yes. So a combined total of incomplete actions was 307 as at the 7th of June 2017. Yes?
Yes.
Yes. If we look at page 2, we have the age profile of outstanding actions. If you turn to that, you can see that across the page, you've got total outstanding actions that are 4 months or older is 250. And you get that by adding 50 and 72 and 128.
Yep.
You see that?
Yes.
Yes.
Sorry, I was just looking at.
Yes. And indeed, most of the incomplete ones are 12 months plus, aren't they?
Yep.
Yes. I mean, of the 250, 128 are 12 months plus. Were you made aware of these figures at the time?
I can't recall, I'm afraid.
Would you agree that those figures were a cause for serious concern?
Yes.
And that's because, isn't it, I'm inviting you
Yeah.
to agree with me, because they show the reverse of what ought to be the case, which is that the most outstanding should be the youngest, not the oldest.
I agree.
Yes. Do you know why the trend was rising and not falling?
No.
And if you look at it closely, you can see that the core of the problem is responsive repair, where the figure goes up exponentially the older you get. You see that?
Yeah.
Yes. Do you know why that was?
Not at this stage, no.
At that stage?
Oh, not looking at this, I don't.
Right. Do you remember, and this is only a week or so before the fire, any discussion about why it might be that within responsive repairs you were experiencing an exponential rise in outstanding actions the older they became?
I can't recall, sorry.
Would that not have indicated to you at the time that there was a fundamental problem in the TMO's management of outstanding actions, and in particular repairs, responsive repairs?
Unless I saw the detail, I don't know what they are, sorry.
Right. I'm getting the impression, Mr. Black, that you don't remember anything about it, but also didn't do anything about it, maybe because you didn't know anything about it.
Yeah, I think that's not a bad assessment.
Right. Are you able to explain to us how it came about that you weren't made aware of this profile?
What I'm saying is that, so maybe I was, I don't know, this 4 or 5 years ago, I'm just trying to remember. It's that thing about did I see it or did I not see it? It's quite hard to remember.
All right. Now, we can't see from this document whether these outstandings are red or amber or green, do we?
No.
Again, I'm assuming from your evidence just now that you've got no recollection of having any impression of whether the age profile of these, and particular the responsive repairs, was in respect of mainly reds or mainly greens, or
I couldn't tell from this.
any balance between them. Right. Standing back, do you agree that the evidence collated by the TMO on FRA actions at this stage, this is a week before the fire, in light of the long history we've been examining today, shows that the TMO had a long-term and systemic problem in addressing FRA actions in a timely manner?
I'm not sure if I'd say that, but I recognise that the 12 months aren't looking great.
There was no review mechanism, as I think we established yesterday, at senior management level of fire risk overall, was there?
Apart from at the Health and Safety Committee.
Yes.
And I don't know if Repairs Direct had something in place in their organisation.
Do you accept that you as CEO had ultimate responsibility to ensure that the TMO carried out its fire safety obligations adequately?
Yes.
And responsibility to review and make changes where necessary to ensure that the TMO was meeting its statutory fire safety obligations?
Yes.
Do you agree that you didn't do so?
No, I agree that we've actually improved the situation and continue to try to do that.
So you don't agree that you failed in your responsibility?
I have to accept responsibility.
Do you agree that you failed to discharge it?
I accept responsibility.
Do you agree that you failed to discharge it, Mr.
I
Black?
discharged my duty through other people. So when I'm looking here, the sort of repairs, day-to-day repairs sat with Repairs Direct, so that duty would have sat with the managing director.
Will you agree with me that the TMO, of which you were the CEO, and therefore for this purpose its embodiment, did not make suitable and sufficient assessment of the risks to which the relevant persons, and in particular your residents, were exposed at Grenfell Tower?
I'll have to accept that.
Now let's go to your witness statement, please. TMO 50888, page 17. And go please to paragraph 88. You say here, under the heading, the fire and safety measures within the building at the time of the fire, TMO sought to comply with its health and safety and fire safety duties by adopting safety management systems involving policies and strategies, monitoring its safety performance, conducting audits and reporting its safety performance. If that is true, how come there were so many outstanding FRA actions as at the date of the fire?
So we'd reduced the number of outstanding actions over a piece of time. That's in the sense of what we've been talking about earlier today. I can't understand, because I don't know details, what are the ones that have caused us such problems to clear in the older 12 months. I think it's a problem, as I said, that trying to clear these fire actions are not easy, and we focused on it and didn't try to not take it seriously.
Is your evidence that the legislative requirements were not reasonably achievable?
I think with the fire risk assessment actions are challenging to achieve constant getting rid of them. I think it's a struggle.
Yes, that wasn't my question. My
Sorry.
question, I'll try it once more. Is your evidence that the requirements of the RRO, the legislative requirements on the TMO as the responsible person, were not reasonably achievable?
We sought to achieve it.
Is the truth, Mr. Black, that the TMO never really faced up to the degree of failure to comply with its obligations under the RRO, and recognised that there was a fundamental systemic problem with closing out RRO actions in accordance with your own fire risk assessors' timescales, as understood by Janice Ray?
We found it challenging.
Standing back, why were you in that position? Let me suggest three possibilities, and if you can think of another, please tell us. Was it the age and condition of your social housing stock and its size which meant that keeping residents reasonably safe from fire was impracticable?
I think the shape of the stock could be an issue in terms of actually we had specific issues, because you had the stuff after the pre-war, but the stuff in the 60s, 70s, 80s in terms of created problems in terms of the design. So I think that sort of contributes sometimes to the problem to try to resolve these issues. Certainly leaks, are completely different things. I think historically, I don't think the stock, in terms of if you look at investment in stock, because the way government-financed local authority, that actually long-term investment had only started really in 2012 when HRR freedom was given. Up until then, the government controlled the finances which went into it. Yes, there was an uplift in terms of decent homes, which was a programme, but a lot of times that dealt with the interior, the kitchens, the bathrooms, rather than the actual sort of structure of the buildings which decay over time, sort of thing.
Given that answer, that takes us to another possibility. Your inability or unwillingness to resource proper fire safety measures appropriate to the age and size of your stock.
I wouldn't accept that.
Or was it just a blind spot about how serious it all was?
I don't think it was a blind spot. I think we tried with the resources we had to meet our obligations.
And you knew you weren't meeting them, but you never asked for any more money.
Oh, no.
No, you agree, or no, you disagree?
Can you say the question again? Sorry?
Yes. Was it? I asked you whether it was a blind spot. You didn't think it was. I'm suggesting that you knew you were not meeting the legislative requirements, but never asked for any more money.
I'm not sure of that one.
Let's turn to a totally different topic, which is Adair Tower. First, can we look at the deficiency notice for that building? And the date, so that you've got it firmly in your mind, is the 12th of October 2015. TMO 00842271. And this is the deficiency notice itself of that date, addressed to Janice Ray in respect of Adair Tower. Did you ever see this document?
I can't recall. Apologies.
I think we found documents that suggest that you might have done, and I just want to try and pin down whether you actually did or not.
I think if you find documents, I'll accept that I've seen it.
All right, but you can't recall.
I can't recall at the moment, no.
No. I take it that you've read it before coming into the witness box.
This? Yes.
Yes. Do you agree with me that it highlights significant failings with carrying out works identified in fire risk assessments relevant to Adair Tower?
So this is, sorry, I'm just trying to remember what the action, is this before the fire, sorry?
It is, and that's the point. If we go to page 3,
Yeah.
you can see the schedule. Article 11. At the time of the audit, your preventative and protective measures had not been planned, organised, controlled, monitored or reviewed where required. It was found that significant findings had not been monitored and reviewed to ensure works had been completed. And it goes on to page 4, Article 17.1 and Article 8. You just look at those. Do you agree that those highlighted significant failings with carrying out works identified in fire risk assessments? Specific, I accept that it might have been a bit of a general question. Look at Article 8. At the time of the audit, the general fire precautions as identified in the significant findings of your fire risk assessment had not been implemented. It was found that you were unable to confirm if the significant findings in your fire risk assessment had been addressed. Just on the face of it, that's quite a serious concern, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah. So given that it was a serious concern which potentially at least exposed TMO to criminal prosecution for a regulatory offence, that's something that really should have been brought to your attention at the first opportunity, shouldn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now, the fire itself took place on the 31st of the same month, October 2015. Let's look at a chain of emails that were exchanged on the morning of that fire. TMO 00869159, please. And if we start with page 2 and your email to Janice Ray at 10:57, you can see that. Copy to Sasha Jevons, Teresa Brown and Pete Griffiths. Fire Adair Tower. Hi, Janice and Sasha. Now, just before I show you the text, the fire occurred that morning And it looks from this email chain that you have had a discussion mid-morning with Janice Ray and Sasha Jevons, and you're now following up with some questions.
Yeah.
You say, as discussed, it's attracting attention of the press, and 3 areas emerging in terms of speculation. And then you have 1, 2, 3, and then underneath that you say, Janice, you say overall it's stay and be rescued, and FB do not require fire extinguishers. You said you had recent audit with FB, and we got some notice. Small risk, but of concern to me, so I need to understand the risk. Now, the reference to some notice, what was that?
Well, I think that might be the deficiency notice.
Yeah, yes, it might be, but I agree that is a possibility sitting here, but do you remember whether it was?
I can't remember, but reading this, that's what I would imagine I was saying.
Right. Looking at that then, do we take it that you hadn't received the notice, because you say some notice, and are just recording back to Janice what she had told you?
Yes.
Would that mean that Janice Ray had not brought the deficiency notice to your attention until there was a fire at the end of that month?
It would appear so.
Can you explain why she didn't do that?
No.
I mean, would you agree with me that that is a serious failing on her part?
Yes.
Do you know why you wrote the word small risk? Did she say it's a small risk and you were recording it, or was it your assessment that there was a small risk?
Well, I think it would have been what I was told, in terms otherwise I'd have said big risk, I think.
Right. Now, we can see your draft announcement to all the staff at TMO 00866 and this is an email at the top of the page from Pete Griffiths to you, tweaking the announcement below for forwarding purposes. So, look, is this right, that Pete Griffiths had drafted the text of an announcement to go to all the TMO staff and was giving it to you for approval?
Yes.
Or he tweaked it and was giving it to you for approval. Now, if we go to page 1, lower down, please, and look at the last paragraph in the draft message, it says, the effective response we have provided reflects our strengths as a locally based tenant-led organisation and the professional skills of teams in the TMO and Repairs Direct, as well as those of our contractors, PEDAs, and our MA Stewart. You see that?
Yes.
Now, just pause there. Let's also look at your email to the TMO board, TMO 00866 Dear board members, and this is, I should just show you from you, because it says on 2nd November 2015 at 15:38, Robert Black wrote. We're not looking at the right. Yes, that's right. It's about a fifth of the way down your screen. Do you see that?
Yes.
Yes. Dear board members, this is to update you on the situation at Adair Tower. And then if you cast your eye through your message down to the bottom, you say at the bottom of page 1, overall our response to the fire was very rapid, so thank you again to Mary Fay and Councillor Mason who alerted me. This allowed me to start our emergency process. I'll provide details of all the staff who took part later. And then over the page, you say very good response from the contractors, and thanks to the local Catholic Church. Would you agree with me that in general both of the messages that I've just shown you, your announcement, at least in draft form to the staff, and your note to the board, presented TMO's reaction to the Adair Tower fire as successful?
In principle, yes.
The message to the TMO board members doesn't mention the deficiency notice that the TMO had received on the 12th of October, does it?
No.
Why is that?
I don't know. I mean, that's why I need to confirm if I knew about it.
Yes. You are chief executive and head of the executive team, yes?
Yeah.
And your responsibility was to keep the board fully informed and up to date with anything that might affect the TMO's legal position.
Yes.
Yes. So are you able to explain why the board wasn't told in your own message or at all about the deficiency notice received only 2.5 weeks before the fire?
No.
Do you know when the board was first informed about the pre-fire deficiency notice for Adair Tower?
I can't recall, sorry.
From our records, please correct me if this is wrong, from our records it wasn't until March 2016, so 3 months later. More, I'm sorry, 5 months later.
Right.
Are you in a position to correct that?
I'll just have to believe you.
Can you explain it?
No.
Can we please look at TMO 00880-329? This is Barbara Matthews' notebook. I will... That's the first page of it. I'm so sorry. Page 101 is what we want. This is my reading, her handwriting. But if you look at it, it says, fire meeting, 3rd November 2015, hub, flat 15, fire. People in temporary accommodation want to get as many back as possible. And then OGS or OCS to do cleaning. Fire brigade have visited, assessed as structurally safe. And then a little bit lower down, you can see in the penultimate entry on that page, it says, discussion about fire brigade need to have doors having self-closers. Fire consultant to visit to make assessment and take photos. Now you can see that there's it's the meeting on the 3rd of November. Were you at that meeting?
I can't recall.
Would it be usual that you would attend a meeting with Barbara Matthews on a matter such as this?
I imagine so, yeah.
Even if you weren't there, can we take it that you were nonetheless made aware, either at this meeting or around this time, of the LFB's concern about self-closers?
I can't recall.
Can we then look at the next document at TMO 00869-184? Just to be clear, Barbara Matthews' evidence was that you were at this meeting. That's day 148, page 54, line 18 to 55, line 20. That was her recollection. Are you in a position to dispute that?
Sorry, dispute what? Sorry.
That you were at the meeting of the 3rd of November 2015.
Well, I'm not going to dispute it if she said I was there.
Right. So can we therefore take it that you were aware from this time of the LFB's concern about self-closers?
I'll have to accept that, yeah.
Yes. So now, if we look at this chain of correspondence, I'd like to go to page 6, please, with an email from Janice Ray to Rebecca Burton. Now, Rebecca Burton was the local LFB fire safety team leader, and this email is dated 22nd of October 2015. So just in date terms, this sits between the date of the deficiency notice on the 12th of October 2015 and the date of the fire on the 31st of October 2015. And she says, hi, Rebecca. Could we urgently arrange a meeting, please, to discuss the issues that you put on the agenda for our meeting on Tuesday that you were then unfortunately unable to attend? I'm concerned to hear from Julie that she's about to issue 5 deficiency notices, one each for 5 separate staircases at Balfour House, at least in part due to the fact that nominally fire-rated doors do not have self-closers fitted. Our approach to self-closers has been dictated by our fire risk assessor following clarification he received from a discussion the LFB head of policy and head of enforcement, and we've provided many FRAs to the LFB over the years, but not been challenged about this approach. Therefore, in good faith, we considered we were applying the appropriate standard. If that's not the case, or if the LFB standard has changed its position on this, I need to understand this, not least because of the potential impact on our organisation. Now, that's her email. And we can see if you go up a little to page 3, over to page 4, on page 3, Rebecca Burton responds to Janice Ray on the 4th of November and explains in the first 2 paragraphs that she wants to touch base, she's been on leave and has some questions. You see that? And then Janice Ray on page 2, if you go to page 2, Janice Ray responds, or writes rather, to Alex Bosman and David Gibson, but copies in Peter Madison, Barbara Matthews, and you. You see that?
Yes.
Hi, Alex and David. Please see below a list of queries from the LFB inspecting team leader. Are you both able to advise on points in green? Would we have original plans anywhere? David, something about scaffold. And I will draft response to the FRA queries. You see that?
Yeah.
Did you read that email when you got it, do you think?
Yes.
Did you look down the chain?
I can't recall.
Do you remember being made aware that there were potentially 5 more deficiency notices in the pipeline, in part at least to do with door closers, self-closers?
I can't recall, sorry.
Look, on the face of the documents, it's a fair assumption, isn't it, that you were, yes?
Well, I'll have to accept that, yeah.
Yes. Now, you then attend a scrutiny meeting with the RBKC on the 5th of November 2015. So the day after this document that you get from Janice Ray, this email, and 2 days after the meeting you attended with Barbara Matthews, it's at RBK 48049. These are the minutes of the RBKC Scrutiny Committee. And if we go to page 6, please, you can see you're in attendance from page 1, but on page 6, if we go to that A7 live issues report by the Director of Housing, and it says, Mr Black provided an update on the major fire at Adair Tower, which had occurred on Saturday, 31st October on the 3rd floor. He reported that the investigation was ongoing, but the emergency planning in place had worked, and the fire doors had also worked well. He explained the timelines for tenants regaining access to their flats and the rehousing of those unable to return. The chairman stressed the severity of smoke damage and how that can affect one's possessions. Mr Black said that the TMO was working with tenants to ascertain what they could still use, and he said that it was compulsory for all tenants to have their own home insurance. Councillor Blakeman asked why tenants were led out of smoke-filled stairways and consequently had to be treated for smoke inhalation. Mr Black explained that the policy was to stay in your flat and wait to be rescued by the natural reaction of people was to flee. He said that there was no main alarm system, but the fire brigade had arrived within 2 to 3 minutes. And then there's a discussion about temporary accommodation and the local church providing teas and coffees. Now, just focusing on your report I've just read to you, what was the basis for your statement to the scrutiny committee that the fire doors had also worked well?
I was talking about the fire doors on the floor where the fire was. So it's I think there was six flats per floor, and 5 of the doors had been kept closed and the residents had stayed there. One person had came out and used the wrong stairwell, and I think that's the one that got the smoke inhalation. That was what the fire doors I was talking about there.
Right. Now, in response to Councillor Blakeman's question about tenants being led out of smoke-filled stairways, you say that the natural reaction of people was to flee. Was it or were you meaning to say that people had fled through smoke-filled stairways instead of being led?
I'm slightly confused by the minute, because a lot of people had left the property. It was quite early in the day, so a lot of people, when the fire came, brigade came, had left. So I don't understand it, because when the fire brigade evacuated the building, it was later. So I don't know if they led people out, but I thought the building was mostly empty.
On a different aspect, we can see here no mention at all by you of the pre-fire deficiency notice for Adair Tower. Do we?
No.
Why is that?
I can't recall.
By this time, as we've seen from the email, you had been told by Janice Ray that there had been a notice. Why did you not pass that information, so far as you knew it, to the scrutiny committee?
I can't recall, sorry.
Now, of course, we know that there were doors, problems with the doors and the smoke ventilation system. Do you agree that that fact was material for the HPSC to know?
I should have probably mentioned it, yes.
Yes. In fact, isn't it the case that, given the problems with door closers, as reflected in the notice of deficiency for Adair Tower, you materially misrepresented the facts by saying that the fire doors worked well?
What I was talking about is the fire doors on the floor the fire operated.
Yeah.
They held back the fire and the smoke, and the people inside were safe and stayed.
Well, that would have, no doubt true, drawn the eye to a successful part of the operation, but drawn the eye away from other inherent defects in the building that by then you knew about.
I can't remember. Apologies.
Do you accept that you presented the Hpsc with a misleadingly rose tinted view of the fire safety measures in that building?
No, I don't accept that.
Both Councillor Marshall and Councillor Mackover told the inquiry that they regarded the notice of deficiency as a material matter to be brought to their attention. Are you able to explain why they were not told about it?
No, I can't.
Can we then move to Carl Stokes's FRA and action plan for Adair Tower of the 11th of November 2015? Can we start with TMO 00840415? Now, this is an email from Janice Ray of the 13th of November 2015 to you, Barbara Matthews, and Sasha Jevons, subject Adair Tower meeting with the LFB Fire Safety Team Leader. And it appears to follow her meeting, Janice Ray's meeting with Rebecca Burton. And it says, Robert, Barbara, Sasha, as you know, I met with Rebecca Burton this morning to seek clarification on the LFB's response to the fire. She advised that there are certain trigger events that cause the LFB to undertake a review following a fire. In the case of Adair, there were two trigger factors. One, fire survival calls, and two, people rescued from balconies. And then she goes on, this LFB review was undertaken by Rebecca, who confirms this has now been completed and presented to the Deputy Assistant Commissioner. Part of the review required an audit of the block and also of Hazelwood Tower as a design identical to be undertaken within 24 hours of the fire. This was undertaken by Inspecting Officer Matthew Ramsey on Monday, 2nd November, and his audit resulted in both blocks being assessed as level 5, the highest level, which would generally result in enforcement action / prosecution. Now, if we go to page 2, at the bottom of the email, Janice Ray says this, however, it's the last but one paragraph, however, it seems, specifically they're focusing on self-closers on flat entrance doors and ventilation. Her stated preference would be to have both staircases closed as opposed to one unenclosed. However, she's keen to see the reviewed risk assessment. I asked if she needed to see action on both these points. If we fitted self-closers, could she accept the ventilation? And she reiterated that she needed to see the revised FRA. I had the impression that if the FRA recognised the need to fit self-closers, and this was programmed swiftly for both blocks, this might be acceptable. Was this email the first occasion on which you became aware that these, as set out here, were the LFB's principal concerns?
Yes.
Right. Notwithstanding the fact that you'd seen a deficiency notice by this time.
Sorry, yes.
Then let's look at TMO 00866489. This is an email chain in a little bit later the same month, November 2015. And if we go to page 2 at the bottom, email on the chain, we can see that Janice, on the 18th of November, Janice Ray sends you and Barbara Matthews the revised FRA for Adair Tower. And she says, just received the reviewed FRA and action plan. Now, I'm sorry, I put this to you on the basis that she sent it to you. It's not actually clear from the email. Did she send it to you, or did she just tell you she'd received it?
I can't tell, sorry.
Right. If we go up the email chain to page 1, we can see that Sasha Jevons writes to Peter Madison, and it looks as if this comes to everybody, because at the top of the email chain it comes to you as a CC. And she says there, "Dear all, following our review of Carl Stokes' record of significant findings and action plan yesterday afternoon, I've reflected on what Carl said." Now, just pausing there, that rather suggests that Janice Ray had sent the FRA an action plan. Do you remember that?
I can't recall.
Remember seeing it?
It looks like it.
Yeah. And she says, "I've reflected on what Carl said. I do not think that the recommendation to install door closers throughout the building is appropriately prioritised, currently high, for the following reasons. A, it's not a statutory requirement to install self-closers retrospectively, therefore should not automatically default to high priority. B, I assume that the leasehold flat entrance doors are demised to the leaseholder. Daniel, can you please confirm? We do not have any enforcement power to install self-closers on these doors. The way this is currently drafted would compel us to carry out work that we don't have the power to enforce. I don't have a problem with us setting out to install door closers following the learning from the fire and completing the work promptly. However, we would be leaving ourselves exposed if we commit to completing work that we don't have the power to enforce. I suggest that the priority is reduced to low or advice, and that we make reference to the fact that we can't enforce this in leasehold properties. Peter." Now, it's not clear to us who actually drafted this, but this was intended, I think, to come from Peter Madison, even though it had come from Sasha Jevons's email account. Do you remember whether it was Peter Madison who had made these suggestions?
It looks like Peter, I'm not
Yes.
sure.
Now, looking at what he said, it appears to be the case that Carl Stokes' original view was that self-closers could be high priority, or should be a high priority action, yes?
Yes.
But Peter Madison doesn't agree with that and thinks that the action should be either low or advice.
Yes.
Did you ask on what basis Peter Madison was qualified, so to speak, to correct the fire risk assessor's risk rating?
I think, sorry, I think I have some memory that there's something about the doors in Adair where they've got these risers, so whether they were acceptable. I'm sort of quite sketchy about that.
Well, that is the case, in fact, as a point of minor detail, and rising butt hinges were disapproved of by the LGA guidance, as I'm sure you know. But I don't know why that is an answer to my question.
Well, I was just trying to remember.
Well, we've got the text of the document here.
I think I remember
see it.
this, yeah.
My question is, did you ask Peter Madison what his basis was for correcting your apparently independent fire risk assessor's risk rating?
I can't recall.
No. Did you know why Mr Stokes' risk rating was up for debate at all?
I think there's something about the timescale in terms of if it was high, they all had to be done in 3 weeks. And I think the issue is if we sign up to a 3 week and can't get it all in, then you have to add for an extension. So it's all then about could you have changed the timescale to more that's actually achievable if you've got leaseholders and we have to go through the whole process. That's the way I saw that. So I don't think it was, I didn't get the sense it was really saying, you know, you don't want to do it, but in the sense of actually, if we're going to sign up to do this, we need to have a time scale we can achieve.
Yes, but your route to doing so is to try to lean on him to get him to reduce the risk, rather than to advise you specifically that a longer time frame for doing this high-risk item was acceptable.
I'm not sure if I like the word lean. I think there's a discussion, and I think that the point was it went back to Carl Stokes for that those discussion points to be taken on board, and he's our fire expert. So, you know, in the end, it's up to him to decide. I don't see this as bullying or leaning. It's more clarification and having a discussion.
Right. At the end of the email, it is Mr Madison's suggestion that the priority is reduced to low. So was the route to getting more time the reduction of the risk level, as opposed simply to asking Mr Stokes for his professional independent advice about whether you might be able to take a bit longer in curing the problem?
Yeah, that's what I would expected him to say.
But that wasn't the way it was presented, was it?
Well, that's how it was presented by Peter, who then, I think Barbara and Janice took it to Carl Stokes for that discussion.
Would you agree with this, that Peter Madison's input here isn't to do with the fire safety need for self-closers as a risk level, but to do with the TMO's ability to meet that need?
I think it's Peter sort of suggesting something, and then we wait to see what Carol Stokes says.
Yes, the suggestion, leaving aside what Mr Stokes might say, the suggestion is that he changes his view about the risk level, isn't it? Not because he'd misassessed it, but in order to allow the TMO more capably to meet it.
I'm not sure.
You're not sure? Let me try. Maybe you misunderstood my question. Let me try it a different way.
Okay.
Mr. Madison's suggestion isn't anything to do with the fact, is it, that the TMO thought he'd misunderstood the level of risk. It was to do with enabling the TMO more readily to carry out the suggested action.
Yeah, that's the way I would read it. Yeah.
In which case, why not simply ask Mr. Stokes, as opposed to changing his risk level, whether he could advise you as to the maximum time it would be safe to take to cure the defect?
I wasn't at the meeting with Mr Stokes, and I didn't see this part of the evidence of Barbara or Janice about how the conversation went.
Let's look and see what Mr. Stokes says about this. This is his impression of this exercise. Can we please have the transcript for day 138, page 201? And let's look at line 10. And he's being asked about a different document. And he's asked, leave aside who filled in that box under TMO action. We can see that you downgraded this to strong advice. Did you do that because you were under pressure to do so from the TMO? That's what it looks like, yes. Yes. Did you think it was appropriate at the time that the TMO should be challenging your professional judgment on what priority should be given to an item in your FRA? Answer, I'm going to say probably yes. Question, why didn't you stand up robustly and independently to the TMO on a matter of what was your professional judgment? Answer, some battles you fight, the work is being undertaken. Whether I put high in there on a priority or red, but the work is still being undertaken. Do you accept that Mr Stokes was placed under pressure to downgrade the FRA action by the TMO?
I don't accept that. I mean, that's his perception of the conversation I wasn't at.
As we can see from this exchange, what in fact eventuated was that Mr Stokes did change his high priority to strong advice. Did you ever think that that exercise rather undermined the point of seeking the advice and input of an independent FRA in the first place?
No, I as an independent professional, it's down to him. If he changed it and he doesn't agree with it, I don't quite understand it. Like I said, I wasn't there at the meeting when they had this meeting about it, so I don't know if Barbara and Janice strong-armed or it's his perception. I mean, I don't know what those two said it when he took evidence from them.
Well, let me leave it with you this way. Was it your impression from this exercise that Mr Stokes had revisited his opinion about the relevant risk level for this item and revised it in accordance with his own professional view,
Yeah.
or simply given in?
No, I would say the first.
You said it first. What's the basis of that?
Because he's a professional and that's how he should make his decision.
Well, maybe that is how he should make his provision. On that, I think I agree with you. But what leads you to think that he did so on this occasion, given his evidence to the inquiry?
I think, he needs to... This is his narrative, not mine. That would seem strange as a professional. He hasn't followed his own rules, and I think that... So I just find it very weird.
Can we then go to December 2015 and what the board gets told? TMO 00902 The first email I'd like you to look at with me is the 2nd of December 2015,
Yep.
Dear board members. Now, it looks as if this is a draft because it passes between you and Sasha Jevons. Would that be right?
I can't recall.
Dear board members, we updated you at board. I can't recall. We updated you at board about the fire, and have been having conversations with the FB since the fire. They have been reviewing the fire and have a matrix which identifies a number of issues which results in a response which is split into 3, and they are deficiency notice, enforcement and prosecution. The level of response from FB comes from a matrix they do following a fire. In discussions with them, they have said they received 15 to 20 calls saying residents could not get out of their flats because of smoke and smoke in the stairways, and they rescued 2 people from balconies. Because of these 2 issues, they have deemed both Adair and Hazelwood to be high risk, and therefore the actions are enforceable. We've been told we will get these enforcement notices next week with, we think, a 6-month timescale to complete the works. Now, it appears to be that this is your suggested text for Sasha Jevons to send to the board. Is that right?
Or to check it?
Or to check it. Your suggested text gives an explanation of the 3 potential responses to the fire, doesn't it?
Yes, so
Yes.
probably I would have spoken to Janice in drafting this.
Right, I see.
Or Barbara, sorry. Barbara and Janice.
Yes. At all events, you can see that there's no trace of any reference in that paragraph to the 12th of October 2015 deficiency notice, is there?
No.
Why is that?
I can't recall. Apologies.
Was this not the perfect opportunity to tell your board that 2.5 weeks before the fire, you had received a notice of deficiency about the very building that caught fire?
Yes.
And not least that you were actually explaining the three-stage process.
Yes.
Now, in due course, Barbara Matthews sends this email to the board. Let's look at that. Tmo 00902920. Dear board members, in Robert's absence, I've been asked to provide you with the following update. And this is dated now the 4th of December. And you can see from the first copy list that you are copied into it, yes?
Yep.
Again, Barbara Matthews makes no reference to the 3 potential responses that you'd set out. In fact, I say again, let me rephrase the question. You see that Barbara Matthews makes no reference even to the 3 potential responses that you'd set out, does she?
No.
Do you know why the text of this message was changed in that way?
No.
Did you take it up with Barbara Matthews?
I can't recall. Apologies.
Now, we can also see that she makes no mention of the 12th of October 2015 deficiency notice, does she?
No.
And did you not ask her to do that?
You would have thought so.
Did you ask her not to do that?
No.
Now, you
do
sent, if we go to TMO 00902921, we can see that on the same day, 4th December 2015, you sent an email to Barbara Matthews and Sasha Jevons the same day, which has underneath it the very email I've just been showing you,
Yeah.
sent to the board. Barbara and Sasha, thank you, great note. Robert. So you read it, approved the rather reduced version of events, even from your own draft.
Yep.
Why?
I.
Can you explain why you were giving the board a version of events that was so potted that it even omitted the vitally important reference to the deficiency notice of the 12th of October?
I can't explain it now.
You were keeping the board in the dark.
No, I wouldn't do that.
Well, you did.
I'll accept that.
Now, in due course, the enforcement notice was served by the LFB, wasn't it?
Yes.
TMO 00840703. There it is, 23rd December 2015, addressed to the company secretary of the TMO. And if we look at TMO 009029 933, please, we can see that this was sent to you on the 4th of January 2016. What appears to have happened, if we look at that email run, at the very bottom of the page, Rebecca Burton writes to Janice Ray on the 3rd of January, and apart from the rather welcoming tone of the first sentence, the second paragraph says, please find attached a copy of the enforcement notice. And that email is then copied to Barbara Matthews, and at the top of the chain you can see that Barbara Matthews sends that on to you on the 4th of January, sent last night.
Yeah.
So it appears that what's happened is that although formally the notice was dated the 23rd of December 2015 and sent, a copy is sent in by Rebecca Burton early in January to Janice Ray, and she sends it on to you through Barbara Matthews.
Yeah.
Yes. Did you read it when you saw it?
Yes.
Yes. Now, if we go then to TMO 00902938902938938, you get this document through a different route as well on the 4th of January 2016, this time from Nicholas Holgate. If you go to page 2, you can see that it comes to you,
Yeah.
which he's received from Rob Davis, and you respond to that at the top of page 2, bottom of page 1. We can just look at that. And there's discussion about having a meeting. That's the effect of it.
Yeah.
And in the end, in fact, there was a meeting set up for the 6th of January 2016 at your suggestion. Yes?
Well, I think so.
Yes, that was the date, but the meeting was at your suggestion, yes. Right. Now, before that meeting, do you remember that Janet, well, perhaps you don't, you weren't there. Let me show you a document, TMO 00841891, meeting between Janice Ray and Rebecca Burton on the 5th of January 2016, so the day before the meeting that you were setting up here. And let's just look at the minutes of that. It's a bi-monthly meeting that customarily took place between Janice Ray and representatives of the LFB, sometimes with Claire Williams in attendance, as she was on this occasion. Adair Tower enforcement notice is item 3, which you need to scroll down on your screen for. You see that? Janice confirmed receipt of Rebecca's email attaching this enforcement notice. She expressed concern that the timescale the notice gives for completing the necessary steps is 23rd of June 2016. Janice requested that this deadline be extended to reflect the fact that the TMO only just received the electronic copy of the notice on 4th January, and as yet no hard copy has been received. Rebecca confirmed that the paper copy of the notice had been posted on the 23rd December, and as per LFB procedures, the 6-month period to undertake the necessary work starts from the date the notice is posted. Therefore, 23rd of June deadline will stand. However, she did advise that a request for an extension of time could be submitted and would likely to be looked upon favourably, providing the TMO could clearly demonstrate sufficient progress with meeting the requirements of the schedule. And then it goes on to say, Janice asked for confirmation that this notice refers exclusively to this block, and the TMO is not required to apply this to the rest of the blocks. Rebecca agreed that this does relate directly to Adair Tower. However, the LFB could expect that standards required in one block are also required in other block. Now, do you remember having any discussion about this time with Janice Ray as a result of this meeting?
No, what, after this meeting?
After this meeting.
I can't recall.
Let's go to page 3 of this document, item 8. Risk assessments. Rebecca raised her concern that our fire risk assessor sometimes makes statements which are not justified or supported, and that FRA reports need to include justification for statements made. In particular, reference to discussion with senior LFB officers must provide names, dates, and confirmation of outcome of discussions, etc. Also, in relation to Balfour, the FRA needs to be reviewed to clearly demonstrate that the impact of the missing doors in front of the Hopperhead area in the event of a fire has been assessed and documented. Janice agreed to raise these issues with our assessor, but did comment that we have frequently provided copies of FRAs to the LFB in recent years, and until now these have been well received, considered to be comprehensive, and no criticism had been fed back. Did Janice Ray raise with you at any point, but particularly after this meeting, 5th of January 2016, LFB's concerns about Carl Stokes' work?
No, I can't recall.
Did you yourself have any concerns about the quality of his work by this point?
No.
Did the fact that the TMO was receiving deficiency notices and enforcement notices not lead you to think that Mr Stokes might be missing something?
Well, I think we received the enforcement notices because of the fires, and that's, I think, the first time in our history we received one, or ones, because of 2 blocks. In terms of deficiency notice, I think over 9 years we got, was it 7 or something like that? I think it's the fire brigade are doing the job and we're having to respond to it.
Breaking that answer up, it's wrong to say, isn't it, that the enforcement notice was because of the fire. It was because of non-compliances.
Yeah, the enforcement notices were because there was a fire, and as far as I remember the narrative, the fire brigade says after a fire they reassess the buildings, and because of that they provided 2 enforcement notices based on that, so their assessment changed from before the fire to after the fire. That's the way I read it.
Are you saying, going back to your answer, that really the number of enforcement notices and deficiency notices received by the TMO in all these years was negligible?
So I think, again, I think these were the only enforcement notices we'd ever had as far from memory.
Yes.
That's what I'm saying. You're saying you've got lots of them. We've got 2 that came emitted from that fire, and we got 2 because we've got 2 buildings that are very similar. So if we'd only had one of them, we'd only have one. So it's just how that fire then changed the way the fire brigade looked at those buildings.
Was that the way you saw it at the time?
Yes.
And was it that thinking that led you to think that despite these regular FRAs and despite these deficiency notices and the enforcement notices, there was nothing wrong with Carl Stokes' work?
Yes.
Did Janice Ray ever bring to your attention the fact that she and Carl Stokes had a long-standing disagreement of almost doctrinal importance about whether the TMO's lifts were firefighting lifts or not?
I have become aware of this.
You have, but that's because presumably you followed the evidence. But did she tell you about that disagreement at the time?
I don't recall her telling me that.
Did she never tell you that he was unshakably of the view that they were firefighting lifts, and she equally implacably of the view that they were not?
Having followed the evidence, that's what I found.
Did she ever tell you that he often cut and pasted inapposite passages from one FRA into another?
No.
For example, repeated observations about the excellence of the pigeon netting at Grenfell Tower when there was none. She never brought that to your attention?
No.
Now,
I would have thought she would have brought that to his attention.
Well, I'm not sure she did. Now, Janice Ray sent an email summary of the meeting we've just been looking at later the same day, 5th January 2016, to you and Barbara Matthews. We see that at TMO 00840451. Can we go to that, please? Now, it's a pretty lengthy document. I'm just going to select a number of parts of it. Could we please go to the third and the fourth bullet points on the first page? The third one starts, I asked for confirmation. You see that?
Yeah.
I asked for confirmation that this notice related exclusively to this block, and I was advised that although this was technically the case, the LFB view is that standards that we are applying to one block should generally be applied across all blocks. And then the next one, I sought clarification that when the notice refers to fitting of doors that do not provide 30 minutes fire protection, that this relates exclusively to absence of self-closing devices and is not a comment on the fire ratedness of the doors. Rebecca confirmed that Matthew Ramsey has inspected a considerable number of the flat doors and had only raised concern about the absence of self-closers. Therefore, the requirement of the notice is to fit self-closing devices to all flat doors in the block. Now, just pausing there, the effect of the requirement was, wasn't it, that the TMO should ensure that self-closing devices were fixed to every door across all the TMO blocks in the estate?
That would have been a recommendation if you read that.
It was the effect of the TMO's requirement, wasn't it?
Yes.
Yes. Now, the timescale for doing that, at least in relation to Adair Tower, was 6 months, according to the enforcement notice. Yes?
Yes.
Do you agree that it was clearly urgent, particularly since a deficiency notice had been issued for the same reason before the Adair Tower fire, to undertake that work?
On the towers or across all the stock?
Across all the stock?
I think we focus on doing the towers rather than focusing on doing all the stock.
Well, because you've got an enforcement notice?
Say that again, sir?
Because you've got an enforcement notice?
I think I can't answer that.
Let's go to page 2 and look at the penultimate paragraph. Rebecca had asked for an agenda item on flat entrance doors, and at that point she stressed that the LFB required that all, this is in caps, all flat entrance doors throughout our stock are required to be self-closing. I reiterated that our policy is to replace doors to current standard as and when required, and to retrofit self-closers when required by the assessor, when properties are void, etc. However, she did not accept that this went far enough. I asked what the LFB's position was in relation to residents who remove disengage these self-closers once we've installed them, and Rebecca advised that we would need to have a procedure in place for regular checking of these, and this would need to be documented, as would all attempts at access. I explained that this would be virtually impossible to achieve, and could she confirm if this is what other landlords are doing, at which point she admitted that this is what the LFB require. I specifically asked if H and F, that's Hammersmith and Fulham, I think, were achieving this, as this is also her area of responsibility, but she did not confirm. I also asked about lessee flat doors, and her view was that as these form part of the means of escape, we have ongoing responsibility for ensuring that they are self-closing. Again, more regular checking and record-keeping required. So, from this document, from this email, which comes to you on the 5th of January, immediately after her meeting with Rebecca Burton, you could see that Rebecca Burton was making it crystal clear that all doors across the estate had to have self-closers, and also they had to be subject to a regular checking regime.
But she couldn't confirm that she's applying the same standards across the tri-borough.
Indeed, but I'm just asking you to, well, perhaps I should put a question. Could you understand from this email that Rebecca Burton's position was that she wanted the TMO not only to ensure that all self-closers in the estate, all flats in the estate had self-closers, but there should also be a regular checking regime. That was her requirement. Do you agree with that?
Yes, I can see that.
You can see that. Now, leaving aside whether this was right on a comparative basis or not, was this the first time that you were aware of that LFB requirement?
Yes.
Right. And does that include the regular checking of self-closers post-installation?
Yes, because I think that's what they're expecting.
Yes. Now, Janice Ray notes that she told Rebecca Burton that this would, I'm paraphrasing, be virtually impossible. Did you agree with Janice Ray that it would be virtually impossible?
I think it would be incredibly challenging.
Yes.
To suddenly change a position that has been held to suddenly saying, you need to do all this within this time. And so it's a fundamental change in terms of actually the way we were looking after our properties.
Yes,
and that we knew of no other local authority that was being asked to do this.
you respond to Janice Ray the same day. I think
You think?
along the same lines as you've just explained. If you go to TMO 00902 this is your email back to Janice Ray on the 5th, same day. Janice, thanks for the note. I think we need to discuss the implications of this at ET and speak to Laura about how best to respond to these issues, as it is a major shift. Can you just explain why you thought it was a major shift?
Because actually we hadn't done it before. There was no programme for a borough-wide inspection of all doors for door closures, and then to have a regular inspection situation once a year or 4 times a year, or whatever the requirement would be. So that's a huge change coming from this fire, and it's something that the reason sent it to or spoke to Laura is because fundamentally we'd need to let them know and see how we take this forward.
You say a major shift by the LFB. Do you mean a shift by the LFB?
Well, yeah, because actually we've never, like I say, we've never had a programme, unlike gas and other things, where you would actually enter a tenant or leaseholder's property to check door closure and check it once a year or twice a year. And actually I knew of no other organisation that I'd worked with or worked alongside that had a programme in place either.
What was the LFB's position about having regular checking of self-closers on all doors in your stock before early January 2015?
I can't recall that, sorry.
Well, was it a position...
I don't think there was a position that you had to check door closures.
Was
We did check door closure. If we knew a door closure wasn't working, if someone reported it, those would be fixed. If someone saw them come off, we would report it and get them fixed. That was our sort of programme, or checking them when we did voids, that the properties met those standards.
I'm just trying to get to the bottom of what you mean by shift or change. Change from what? So the key question is, what was the LFB's previous position from which you were now saying it was shifting?
Well, the previous position, I think, was that we weren't required to have a borough-wide programme to check all the doors, closures, not the doors, and an annual system.
Did the LFB ever tell you, or tell the TMO to your knowledge, that you were not required to have a borough-wide programme to check all the door closures?
No, the fire brigade would never say that.
No. Now, Janice Ray responds, and Mr. Chairman, perhaps I'll just look at this one more document.
Yes.
Break. Janice Ray responds to you, and you respond again. Let's look at the exchange at TMO 00902 she says, I'm concerned that even if we manage to install self-closers across the stock, the LFB expectations of how much checking we would be required to do would be impossible for us to achieve. It is therefore likely that in the event of a fire where a flat door did not self-close, we are potentially always going to be held liable. And your response to that, at the top of page 1, same day, 5th January 2016, I agree, and that is the risk we need to raise with both our board and RBKC. Why do you agree with Janice Ray that checking would be impossible to achieve?
So the whole thing is people take door closures off, and therefore actually we could do a whole programme of putting door closures on, and then they could all be taken off, and then if there was a fire, the fire brigade come along and said you haven't checked the door. So I think it's just trying to get your head round. So in terms of a sector, we have had gas checking for a number of years in terms of actually annual gas checks, which taken years and years to ensure that you have the legal courts in line that actually support you to be able to do that. The reality with that is the court backlogs results actually, I don't know where it is now, but when I'd left, basically most organisations were doing gas checks over a 9-month period rather than a year period, because actually if you do it in a 9-month period, that gives you 3 months to actually chase people through the system to ensure you can actually get that gas check in place if they don't give you access. So that is, that's in place. It can still get organisations into serious trouble if you don't do your gas checks and have all your certificates. And here was another sort of process which is, in a sense, more complex and easier because actually people can take them off. And how would you do it? So, and actually would the court support us if people don't give us access to their property? What do we do with leaseholders? We've already seen how long it took to sort out the issues with leaseholders because they're assigned to the leaseholder. So I think it created this sort of thinking about how do you do it. I mean, I'm not saying it's a bad thinking, I think it's a thinking about then you have to actually process, and there's a cost to that you then need to build in. I think also, it's also about, this is a tri-borough local authority, so are they happening in the other boroughs as well? Because actually, why would it happen just in Kensington, Chelsea? I mean, what's the thinking of the fire brigade? So we just do one, but we can allow the other one? So I think there's lots of questions there that actually, through that decision, or that advice, that you actually started thinking about.
Go back to what it was that the LFB was asking for. We can do it on this document, page 3. You'll see the penultimate paragraph of the email I read out to you at length. And the nub of it is in the middle of that paragraph. Read with me. She didn't accept that this went far enough. I asked what the LFB's position was in relation to residents who remove / disengage these self-closers once we've installed them. And Rebecca advised that we would need to have a procedure in place for regular checking of these, and this would need to be documented, as would all attempts at access. Now, that's what she asked for. Why did you agree with Janice Ray that it would be impossible to have a procedure in place for regular checking and documentation?
I think I agree in terms of the whole thing that Janice is raising. I didn't say specifically it'd be impossible to set up a procedure. You can set up a procedure, but then you have to deliver that procedure. I think that's the bit that Janice and I were saying, yes, impossible, but you would eventually do it, but it's without huge challenges.
Why was it impossible to set up a procedure?
I'm not saying, I think you're mishearing me, so I'll repeat. You can set up a procedure to go to someone's door, knock on it, open it, check the door closure. If it's not there, fix it back on, or say it's all right, you tick a box and you put it in the system. It's more about how you actually get to that door, how you get that door open, how you then check it, how many times a year. I mean, you're not even saying, I think here she's sort of saying more, so you might be doing it quarterly. It's a huge job.
Well, we don't see any discussion in this email exchange of how often Rebecca Burton required the TMO to make checks, do we?
Regular checking. So,
Regular.
So that could be a year, that could be more.
Well, exactly.
Yeah. Well, that's still quite one, even if it's just once a year, that is quite regular in terms of actually gaining access to a general needs property, never mind a leasehold property.
I wonder whether the problem here is the way you understood this. Did you understand that the LFB was asking you to put in place a position whereby you could essentially guarantee that all self-closers in your stock would always be working? Or simply that all you had to do was to take reasonable steps by means of a procedure of regular checking to do your best to make sure that that was so?
Well, I would think that if you follow it down, they would go for the first rather than the second.
That was your impression, was it?
Yeah.
Mr. Chairman, is that a convenient moment?
Yes, I think it is. Thank you. I think it's time we had a short break, Mr. Black, so we'll stop now and we'll resume, please, at 25 to 4. And again, please don't talk to anyone about your evidence.
Thank you.
When you're out of the room. Thank you. Thank you. 25 to 4. Would you ask Mr Black to come back in, please? All right, Mr Black?
Oh, thank you very much.
All right, thank you. When you're ready, Mr Black.
Mr. Chairman, thank you. Mr. Black, you told us yesterday during the discussion, I think, about PEEPs, that you had some familiarity with the LGA guide published in the summer of 2011.
A bit, yes.
Yes. Did you ever read that document?
I read it when it first came out. I haven't read it since then because it
Right.
was done at a sort of policy group I went to.
Can we look at it?
Yeah.
It's at HOM 304596. No, that's HOM 45964. I'm afraid I left a digit off. There it is. Can we go to page 125, please? 82, inspections and repairs of other fire safety measures. And if you look at 82.1, other fire safety measures such as fire-resisting doors need also to be maintained. The following details the basic requirements for routine attention in relation to these measures. And then there's a heading, fire-resisting doors. Good practice is to inspect timber-resisting door sets on a 6-monthly basis as part of a programme of planned preventive maintenance. These inspections are aimed at identifying defects such as, first bullet point, missing or ineffective self-closing devices. And then under 82.4, flat entrance doors should be included within this programme. Where leasehold flats are involved, this will only be possible if there is legal right of access by means of a condition within the lease to carry this out. It is important that any new leases include such a condition. Were you familiar with those provisions? I'm assuming you were, given that you read this document.
Yeah, I mean, it's some time ago.
Given that that is the guidance, and the guidance is to have 6 monthly inspections of planned preventive maintenance, particularly in relation to missing or ineffective self-closing devices. What was so extreme about the LFB's insisting that the LFB have a procedure for such inspection?
What I'm saying is that while it's guidance, the organisations I know didn't do this. That's so in a sense it's guidance. So I'm saying in the sector, because you're asking me for my knowledge, in the sector it wasn't a sort of done by everybody.
You described the LFB's attitude expressed at the 5th of January 2016 to Janice Ray as a major shift. You did so again in your evidence, a major change. I'm interested to know why it was such a major shift, given what I've just read to you from the guidance, which was by then some 4 years old.
So I think it's guidance, and what I'm saying is our practice in RBKC with the LFB hadn't been doing it, just like they hadn't been doing it in Hammersmith, Fulham and Westminster.
But with respect, so what, that you hadn't been doing it? The LFB was now asking you to comply with the guidance. Why was that such a problem?
I think I explained it in my previous answers.
So is your evidence, in fact, that this LGA guide was a counsel of perfection, that in your experience it was perfectly reasonable for the TMO to ignore?
I wouldn't put it like that.
How would you put it, Mr. Black?
I'd put it that it was a major change for the organisation, therefore we'd have to understand it. And as I say, go to the council to make them understand it. If we're going to do it, then actually make sure we do it properly.
You can't blame the LFB, though, can you, for asking you to do that which the LGA guidance of national application suggested you should?
I'm not blaming the LFB.
Well, you did suggest earlier that you thought that the LFB might be singling out TMO for special treatment. Given what I've read to you from the LGA guide, that can't be right.
I can't comment any further.
Well, do you agree with me that it would be wrong to suggest that the LFB was singling you out for special treatment when the national guidance suggested, in fact required, a 6 monthly planned preventive maintenance relating to self-closers?
So the only thing I'd say, again, from my experience, I knew of no organisation that actually had that sort of regime in place, unless it was a very sort of specialist one, which was small. But
Now, let's go to TMO 00840-465, please. This is the minute of a TMO executive team and SMT meeting on the 7th of January 2016, as you can see, and you were there.
Yep.
Dan Wood in the chair, Barbara Matthews also there. Can we go to page 4 in that document, please? And under the heading Adair Tower at the top of your screen, you see it says this: Robert Black noted that he and Barbara Matthews met with the London Borough Fire Brigade Commander Rob Davis on 6th January 2016. They were handed the hard copy of the enforcement order for Adair Tower. The key issues are, first bullet point, all flat entry doors to be fitted with self-closing devices, and then there are other matters as well. We now need to go through this and look at the implications. A joint press release with RBKC will go out next month. The enforcement notice for Hazelwood Tower is still to be received. Do you remember what was discussed at this meeting? I'm sorry, at that meeting, the meeting with Rob Davis on the 6th of January.
I can't recall straight away.
No, were minutes taken? We haven't seen any.
I can't remember.
Do you remember whether you raised the concerns expressed by Janice Ray and indeed Barbara Matthews relating to the feasibility of a procedure for checking and maintaining self-closers, namely that meeting the LFB's requirements would be impossible?
I can't remember. Sorry.
Do you remember standing up to Mr. Davis and telling him in no uncertain terms that he was asking the TMO to do, which no council had done in your knowledge, and that it was quite unreasonable of him to make that suggestion? Do you remember saying anything like that to him?
Is that what Mr. Davis said in his evidence?
No, I'm putting it to you as one way of expressing the TMO's approach.
So just confirm there's no record that I said that.
No, you've confirmed.
I apologise.
Well, I asked you whether there were any minutes taken, so
Yeah,
we haven't seen any.
Yeah.
You can't help us. Let me try again. To the best of your recollection of this meeting, and the only note of it we've got is this document, to the best of your recollection, did you tell Mr. Davis that the LFB's requirement for an inspection, a regular inspection regime of self-closing doors was impossible and therefore unreasonable?
I don't have said that, because if I read it, we probably sort of just talked about the issues they raised, and I might have raised it in terms of actually what a challenge that be, and that, because that's what the minute is saying.
Do you remember whether you told Mr. Davis that the TMO thought that the LFB was singling it out for special treatment?
No, I don't remember
and asking
that.
it to do things which no other authority had done?
No, I don't remember saying that.
Let's go to TMO 00840-461. This is an email from Barbara Matthews to members of the Tmo Board on the 12th of January 2016, and it relates to the Adair Tower Fire Enforcement Notice, as you can see from the subject line. You are copied in on it. Dear board members, it starts. On 6th January, we were formally served with an enforcement notice in respect of Adair Tower. The notice is dated 23rd December 2015 and was hand-delivered by the London Fire Brigade Borough Commander Rob Davis at a meeting with Robert Black. And then she goes on. The key requirements of the notice, steps considered necessary, are as follows. All flat entry doors must be fitted with self-closing devices. You see that?
Yes.
And then if you look down, she then talks about, under paragraph 2, windows. Under paragraph 3, corridors, lobbies and stairs used for access are intended for use as a protected route. Compromised by flat entry doors without self-closers, and where remedial work may be required to ensure walls have a minimum 60-minute fire resistance and openings, doors, entranceway, service openings, holes around trunking and pipe work have a minimum of 30 minutes fire resistance. 4 is about signage. 5 is about obstructions to the dry rising main inlet. And 6 is about storage, handling and use of LPG cylinders found on the roof. The notice requires, if you go to the bottom of the screen, the notice requires that all steps must be taken by 23rd of June 2016. And then over the page, it should be noted that points 1 to 4 are a change in policy by the London Fire Brigade as a direct result of the fire, and none of these points have been noted in any previous audits undertaken. Now, the one thing that's missing, would you agree with me, from this email to the board is that the LFB require all flat entry doors across the entire TMO stock to be fitted with self-closing devices.
It depends whether that first sentence at the top covers that.
Yes, that's a fair point. It's ambiguous, isn't it?
Yeah.
There's no reference in here either to the requirement by the LFB that there be a regular maintenance and inspection regime, is there?
No.
Do you know why that is?
No.
Did you inquire?
I can't recall.
No. Page 2, we'll just go back to stick with it, where there's a reference to a change in policy. Was the purpose of that sentence, so far as you understood it at the time, to try to shift responsibility onto the LFB?
No.
Looks like it's an attempt to blame the LFB for why it was that the TMO had suddenly found itself in contravention of the RRO.
I think that's your interpretation, not mine.
It's not yours, right. Let's go to TMO 008527776. TMO Executive Team, meeting 27th January 2016. These are the minutes. There they are. There you are. Could we go to item 3 on page 1, please? Adair Tower Enforcement Notice. Robert noted that we will continue to update the board through the CEO report. Barbara played a video clip of the fire that was found on YouTube. Barbara noted that we have got a genuine case to appeal the notice on Hazelwood Tower. The clip showed that the ventilation in the building worked well and the smoke escaped as it was supposed to. The enforcement notice says to reinstate the protected route, stairs, lobby and lift area. Everything changed when the fire brigade fought the fire from the ground below and from a neighbouring balcony, as the video clip demonstrated, causing the fire to go in the ventilation route. In theory, if everyone had stayed in their flats with the doors shut, it would have been better. We've got 21 days to appeal. Barbara will speak to Laura about doing this and will show her the video clip. We could commission a fire engineer to look into this further. If the fire brigade agree with the findings for Hazelwood, they may possibly look again at Adair Tower. Robert asked, over the page, please. Robert asked where we are with door closers. The enforcement notices state that these have to comply with building regulations, but some of the door frames are old and wouldn't comply. Sasha noted that Alex has read the notice and researched building regulations and has advised it needs to be checked. Robert noted that if we have to replace all the doors and frames, it could cost up to $250,000 for both blocks, and we would have to go to RBKC for this amount. Sasha and Barbara will be speaking to RBKC about getting one of their qualified surveyors out to offer us this urgent advice. We also need to think about whether we charge leaseholders or not. Now, the minute records there that Barbara Matthews raised an issue with how the LFB fought the fire. Do you agree that the basic thrust of this is that the smoke questions or problems were caused by the LFB as opposed to any deficiency in the building?
I think Barbara had watched the video and got quite enthralled in it, in terms of which is reflected in the minute. The London Fire Brigade fight a fire the way they do, and we just had to accept it, which is why I went on about door closures.
Yes, I mean, her point is, I think, is this right, that she'd spotted from the video that she might have a case, or you might have a case, to blame the LFB for the spread of smoke at the fire, and therefore it wasn't any deficiency on the part of the TMO that was to blame.
That might have been Barbara's view. I mean, I can't imagine taking legal action against the fire brigade.
Right.
That'd be my position.
Right. So you didn't think this was worth pursuing, is that right?
Yeah.
Right. But did her attitude not tell you something worrying about the culture, namely that Barbara Matthews, who was head of health and safety, supervising Janice Ray, thought it appropriate to seek to defend and possibly appeal the enforcement notice by seeking to blame the LFB for their own firefighting actions, rather than addressing the problems, the deficiencies, which were set out in the enforcement notice?
I think Barbara has shown that she's completely committed to supporting health and safety and fire safety, and I think it's just she had a hobby horse about the firefighting thing. That was we never considered seriously to challenge the fire brigade.
No, Mr. Black. It shows not that Barbara has shown that she's completely committed to supporting health and safety. On the contrary, she's completely committed to the TMO. That's a different matter, isn't it?
I disagree.
Let's go to a different topic altogether. Do you remember, just casting your mind back, that there was a fire in Lewisham where the Almo in Lewisham had been fined £40,000 as a result of the absence of door closers? If you can't remember, you can't remember. I'll show you a document.
Yeah.
So it doesn't stick in your mind. Let's go to TMO 10012170. Now, if we go, please, to page 2 of this email, please. At the very bottom of page 2, you'll see that there is an email from you of the 1st of February 2016 to Sasha Jevons and Barbara Matthews, subject fire and risk. Can you review and check we are okay on this? It's a reminder that we still need to manage the process going forward with our board and ensure we are completing the FRA. I need that bit of assurance, please. Robert. And then I think what you're doing here, help me with this, is you're cutting and pasting into your email the text of an article in a publication. Almo fined £40,000 for fire safety failures, 29th January 2016 by Safe Barnes. I don't think it's easy to see what the publication was, but the text says, Lewisham Homes has been fined £40,000 for failing to install secure fire doors and carry out regular risk assessments before a fire that caused the deaths of 2 women. And then it goes on over the page. Third paragraph down. At a previous hearing, Lewisham Homes pleaded guilty to 2 charges relating to a failure to maintain fire doors at some of the flats and failure to carry out regular risk assessments in breach of the Fire Safety Order 2005. At the time of the fire in 2011, it had been over 2 years since a fire risk assessment had been carried out. Assessments are meant to be conducted annually. And then there's discussion about what the Crown Court judge said. And then 4 paragraphs below that, it quotes him as follows. It says, Justice Hestia said that the failure to ensure all flats had functioning self-closing fire doors was, quotes, thoroughly dangerous situation which had in fact existed for some time, close quotes. He said high-risk blocks of flats, quotes, can quickly become a death trap when a fire breaks out. And then there's an acceptance at the end by Lewisham. Now, you then, as we see, forward this to Sasha Jevons, and we can see what you've asked them for, which is a bit of assurance. Were you concerned that the TMO itself might find itself in the same position as the Lewisham Almo?
So I now can remember it. Thanks for showing me the thing. So I knew the chief exec that was Almo at the time in Lewisham. Yes, I think it's one of the things that came up. So I sent it on to them to seek assurance.
And you were concerned, were you, at the part that the FRA process might play in such a scenario?
Yes.
Yeah. Would that not have been the perfect time to undertake a thorough review or internal audit of what was going on with FRAs, particularly in respect of door closers, and especially in light of the issues identified by the LFB in the enforcement notice and the earlier deficiency notice for Adair Tower?
I can't comment.
Well, you can, I think. I'm inviting you to accept. We try it differently. Would you accept that now was the perfect time to undertake a thorough internal review or audit of the effectiveness of your FRA closeout processes, particularly with regard to door closers and the wisdom of having a regular check regime?
It could have been, yes.
Well, it was, surely. Surely now is the moment to have a good look. No?
Can you scroll it up so I can see what the answer is?
But absolutely, we can certainly do that. Barbara Matthews writes to Janice Ray. Janice, I'd appreciate your views on how we differ from Lewisham to reassure Robert. Janice Ray, bottom of page 1, top of page 2, to Carl Stokes. What do you know about this fire? The chief executive is panicking.
So,
Yeah. Let's look. It is actually educational. At bottom of page 1, from Carl Stokes to Janice Ray, 1st of February. In short, 2 persons died in this fire. She was something. Your fire, no one died. Janice Ray back. I know, I read that. And they got an enforcement notice too, but they're now carrying out annual FRAs, exclamation mark. I'm anxious that because Adrian has been out of action, we're behind with low-level reviews. Not sure how I can turn them around quickly unless I can use the estate staff. And then response at the very top of page 1 from Carl Stokes. This was a high-rise, so an annual review undertaken in-house is okay. Use the estate staff okay. Meeting the Thursday, 2 p.m. Rearranged Grenfell to the morning at 10 a.m. That's what Janice Ray and Carl Stokes were discussing.
yeah, I can see that.
Not very impressive, is it, really? I mean, to be frank.
It's their discussion. I've not seen this before.
No. I mean, here you've got your fire risk assessor essentially saying that, don't worry, no one died at Adair Tower, and therefore it's a different case.
I haven't seen this correspondence before.
No, it's pretty shocking, isn't it? Think about it.
It's not brilliant.
No. Do you agree with Janice Ray's characterisation of your attitude that you were panicking?
So I'm anxious one moment, panicking the other. I wouldn't describe myself. I'm trying to remember. I don't imagine I was panicking. I'm sure it's because I just had picked something up, either through discussion. I wanted some advice and clarity. It's her word again, not mine.
Yes. Well, I put it to you as something I'm sure you'll accept, that far from panicking, you were asking her about a perfectly reasonable question about a very worrying event.
Yes.
Yeah. Now, let's look and see what's discussed at the TMO executive team meeting on the 11th of February 2016 at TMO 008405002. You are present, as is Barbara Matthews. And if we go to page 2, please, second paragraph, item 3, under the heading Adair Tower and Enforcement Notice Update, it says this: Fowler saying that the board will want reassurance from RBKC, seen by Laura and Nicholas Holgate and the fire brigade, happy with everything. Protected roof is the smoke test. Robert and Barbara want clarity from the strategic part of the fire brigade. RBKC don't want to do this work if not required. Fowler, reputation of RBKC and TMO, everything to be addressed. Board may say a lot in the press about fires. Our fire risk assessments are all okay. RBKC a key partner, and we do what they want. Paper at the next board meeting will be in the open section. Now, just looking at the section or sentence that says Robert and Barbara want clarity from the strategic part of the fire brigade. RBKC don't want to do this work if not required. Can you just help us? On what matter did you want clarity from the LFB?
I'm afraid I can't recall.
Why didn't RBKC want to do the work?
I can't recall, sorry.
The sentence, our fire risk assessments are all okay. Do you know who said that?
Where is that again, sorry?
It's in the penultimate paragraph. Last sentence.
I can't remember who said that now.
Do you know, well, was it you?
I don't think it was me, no.
Do you know the basis for that statement?
No.
And the sentence, RBKC a key partner and we do what they want, was that record correct?
Well, they were a key partner, and if they wanted us to do something, we'd try to do it. In terms of, but I would see that as a, positive. They they sort of worked with us very positively.
Yes, I can understand that pleasing one's client is
Yeah.
obviously a goal if one can achieve it. But did you appreciate that the TMO was a separate corporate entity from RBKC with its own fire safety?
Certainly, yeah.
Yes. So this wasn't a question simply of you dancing to RBKC's tune, or was it?
No, I think because in the end we would be, again, as this goes forward, it's about in the end that RBKC will have to find the funds to do it, because it wasn't in the capital programme, and it would be a substantial budget, which therefore had to come from the HRA business plan.
Now, the next document we need to look at, I think, on this topic is at RBK 401865. Now, it's a document called Adair Tower Enforcement Update on LFB Position as of 6th July 2016, and it was emailed to you by Janice Ray at RBK 401863. Just let me show you the email, first of all, because it's where I can make good the fact that you saw it. Janice Ray to Laura Johnson, copy to Robert Black, subject Adair Tower update on LFB action, attachment Adair Tower Article 27 letter to TMO for residents DAT. Laura, in advance of your meeting today, Robert has requested I send you a briefing note on a telephone conversation had with LFB inspecting officer yesterday. I also attach a copy of the letter I subsequently received from the LFB. Going back to the previous document, namely the note, it appears to be the note of a telephone call between Ben Dewis of the LFB and Janice Ray. Do you remember seeing this document and reading it at the time?
I must have seen it and I must have read it.
Yes. Now, in the third paragraph, it says, Ben confirmed he needed this information, which is contact details, for residents. Because the LFB is still investigating the fire, and in particular it is his intention to interview the 3 residents who were evacuated from their homes by the fire brigade. And then if you look down, just below halfway down the page, to the paragraph that starts further, it says, I challenged Ben on the ongoing investigation and advised him of my initial discussions with his manager, Rebecca Burton. Specifically, she'd indicated that the LFB would be collating all the information from their post-fire audit undertaken on Monday, 2nd November. Their investigations, confirmation that these would be undertaken by Ben Dewis, all the planned maintenance information provided by us at their request, and would discuss with their legal team what, if any, action to take. At that time, Rebecca confirmed that the options were deficiency notice, enforcement notice, or prosecution. And then in the last paragraph on that page, I was concerned to hear that investigations were ongoing and that we had not been made aware of this, but Ben was anxious to emphasise that he was obliged to investigate all avenues. Now, when you looked at this, or when you received it, did you understand from this note that the LFB were still considering a prosecution of the TMO for failures at Adair Tower?
I think it confirms they were looking at a number of actions, and prosecution might be one of them.
Yes. And you could be in no doubt about that, at latest after seeing this document on the 7th of July 2016. Do you agree?
Yeah.
Do you know when you first became aware that the LFB was considering prosecution of the TMO over Adair Tower?
I'm not sure if it is here or...
Right. Now, let's go to TMO 1001594, please. This is the minute of a TMO executive team meeting on the 7th of July. Now, we don't see the time of that, but if we go to page 2, we can see under item 3, Adair Tower is dealt with, and we can see there that Barbara Matthews says, Barbara noted that Janice received a phone call from Ben to say that we would be receiving a statutory information request asking for a list of residents and their contact details of residents that were living at Adair Tower on the 3rd, 4th and 5th floors on 31st of October 2015. Barbara noted that we were surprised to receive this as we have fully cooperated and kept nothing hidden from the fire brigade during their investigation. And then it goes on. Robert has spoken to Laura and Rock, and their view is that we need to pass this to legal. Robert asked Barbara to speak to Laura and update her. What was the conversation between you, Laura Johnson, and Rock Fielding Mellon, I'm assuming it's him, minuted? Was it minuted or recorded in any way?
I can't remember if there's not a note. It was probably just a conversation.
You say just a conversation. Did you have casual conversations with Laura Johnson and Rock Fielding Mellon which you didn't minute?
Yeah, because you saw Laura and Rockfield and Mellon in councils all the time. They were sort of about the borough.
Right. Did you speak to them together? Or was it a three-way call, or did you speak to them separately?
I can't recall. It might have been together. I'm not sure if it had been at the town hall.
Right. Do you remember what Laura and Rock advised, other than it needed to be passed to legal?
No, I think that was the situation.
Do you know whether Barbara Matthews spoke to Laura Johnson and updated her after the phone call?
I don't know.
Now, we know that you then reported to the board on the 20th of July, a few days later. Let's go to the board pack, please, at TMO 10014037. This is page 1 of the board pack. If we go in it, please, to page 68, we can see your report. Now, if we go to 69, we'll see the start of your report. We can scroll slowly through it, but we have looked in vain through this document for any mention of Adair Tower at all. And if we're wrong about that, I will stand corrected. But can you explain why you didn't bring the Adair Tower threat of prosecution to the attention of the board on that occasion?
I can't recall, sorry.
Do you know why you kept the pending threat of prosecution by LFB over Adair Tower from the board?
No.
Could you? How did you think at the time that the directors of TMO could comply or enable the TMO to comply with its obligations to, and indeed comply with their own obligations to protect and promote the TMO, if you had kept them in the dark about the fact that the TMO stood to be prosecuted for breaches of the RRO?
I can't explain that. I wouldn't want to keep the board in the dark about this, so I don't understand.
No. And did you make a positive decision just to keep quiet about it?
No.
And tell the board?
No.
What other explanation is there?
I can't, I don't know if we tell them later or whatever. I can't confirm anything.
Now, there's then a TMO executive team meeting on the 5th of October 2016. We're now in the autumn of that year. TMO 00843-861. We can see you were there. TMO 00843-861. 5th of October 2016 executive team meeting. You are there. Barbara Matthews also there. If we go to page 2, please, item 3, under Adair Tower, item 3.2. LFB are putting pressure on us to fit door closers on all our stock across the business. Laura Johnson has said no to this, but Sasha feels that there should be a discussion at ET. The fire strategy is being updated with a recommendation that this work is done over a 5-year period, although it is likely that LFB will expect a shorter period. Sasha will speak to her team about doing some profiling on this, as with 9,000 properties we would need to know the estimated cost for this and also what others are doing. Our BKC would need to be spoken to about this and given options. Now, looking at the second sentence there, Laura Johnson has said no to this. Why was Laura Johnson able to control whether the TMO did or did not take steps to comply with the RRO?
Because in a sense it would have to come out of the HRA budget. In a sense, the TMO couldn't commit itself to do that unless our BKC agreed, which has started that whole discussion, which
Does that mean that whether or not the TMO complied with its obligations under the RRO was a commercial decision for RBKC?
I don't know. You'd need to ask Laura. I don't know if you asked Laura.
No, I'm asking you, because you're the chief executive. Laura Johnson has said no to this. And on your answer, my question was, why was Laura Johnson able to control whether the TMO complied with the RRO? And you responded, because in a sense it would have to come out of the HRA budget. Does that tell us, I'll repeat the question, does that tell us that whether or not the TMO complied with its obligations under the RRO was a commercial decision, and, what is more, a commercial decision for RBKC?
I think you'd need to ask Laura if that's what she said.
I don't understand.
All right, anyways, sorry.
The note records... Well,
Apologies, sorry. Let me stop.
Right.
I think this is the beginning of a conversation with RBKC, which eventually they recognised actually they were going to have to do it, and actually the decision was then about how to do it in terms of 1 to 5 or 3. I think we suggested 3 years, and then it changed to 5, sort of thing. So I think it was a conversation we kept on going back to RBKC that actually in terms of actually where we are, it's something we're going to have to do, and actually we worked with Laura to actually get her to understand that.
Would it be right to understand that if you made a formal request to RBKC for additional funds, that would be a decision for the council, not for Laura Johnson?
Yeah, because they had very low approval ratings in the council. I think officers were only able to commit up to 250,000. So anything over that would go to the full cabinet.
Yeah. Thank you.
In reality, doesn't this tell us that whether or not the TMO complied with the RRO was ultimately a commercial decision for RBKC?
I think it is about us convincing RBKC through a process, because again, I can't remember all the conversations about this in terms of actually why RBKC was being required to do it when the try or the double borough weren't able to do it. So I think there was questions about the Firegate. What's their strategy? So again, this is a bit confused for me. Sorry.
There's a great respect, Mr. Black. I'm not surprised. What I'm really struggling to get to is to understand how this was set up. And it sounds as if, because Laura Johnson controlled the purse strings about whether you should, taking steps to put the TMO into a position of compliance, the decision as to whether or not TMO should be permitted to comply with the RRO was one not only lying in RBKC's hands, but was a commercial one.
I think you would need to ask them in terms of we went back to them, developed the argument and got to the stage where they were agreeing to fund it.
If you had made a formal request to the council for funding required for this sort of work, presumably the council would either have had to grant you the funding,
Yes.
or given you a formal response declining to grant you the funding.
Yeah.
And you would then have it on your records that you
Yeah.
had asked and been rejected. Is that
Yeah.
how it would work?
And as you say, we start with Laura because she was executive director of housing in the sense,
But it wasn't ultimately her decision, was it?
No, it would be Rockfield and Mellon taking it to the cabinet.
Yeah. And if the cabinet said no, presumably he or someone on behalf of the council would write you a formal letter
Yeah.
saying we've had this application and we've turned it down.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
So, as a result of that, just one more question flowing from that. Does that mean that, in the end, the question of whether you took steps to comply, to put yourself in compliance with the RRO, was a matter out of your hands?
It was out of our hands but we continue to press to get agreement to have it done. I wonder, Chair, since in here I've developed a headache, and I just wonder, is it just from my memory, is it 4:30 we finish?
It would normally be 4:30. Let me just see how we're doing. How are we doing, Mr. Millett?
Mr. Chairman, we're doing well in terms of page numbers and progress. I would be perfectly content to stop now. We've pretty well covered most of this document. It may be that I need to come back to it, but I'm perfectly happy to.
I wouldn't want to finish early if it means I go over on to Tuesday, so that's all I'm asking.
Well, that's really what I was going to find out. Mr. Millett, you've obviously got more questions you want to
Yes.
put to
Yes.
Mr. Black, so we're going to have to ask him to come back on Monday.
So I knew that anyway.
But is there any danger that he won't finish on Monday?
None.
Well, on that unequivocal assurance,
Thank
I'm
you.
inclined to think we could afford to stop early, couldn't we?
Yes.
Yes. Well, that might be the better course.
That would help me. Thank you very much.
Yes.
That's-
Right. Well, we'll do that. We'll stop now then. As I've already said, we're going to have to ask you to come back again on Monday, but you
Yeah.
were expecting that anyway.
Absolutely.
So we'll resume at 10 o'clock on Monday. We're now going into the weekend, so to speak, and so it's particularly important that I ask you not to talk to anyone else about your evidence or anything relating to it over the weekend.
Okay.
And we'll see you again on Monday morning at 10 o'clock.
Thank you, and thank you for allowing it to
No, no.
finish a bit early.
It's good to be of help if we can. Thank you very much. All right, Mr. Millett. Well, this is becoming a habit on your part.
I know, it's regrettable and out of character.
I'm not sure I'd say that, but still. Thank you very much. Well, then it's 10 o'clock on Monday morning.